Okay, well, let me welcome everyone here today. Alhamdulillah. Um, and in a world that is increasingly complex and where I see everyone that I know having some kind of pain, whether it's emotional or physical, challenges from Allah, then I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the strength to accept those challenges, because when we accept them, not only do they become expiation for our sins, but we pass a test for which we receive another blessing. Alhamdulillah. So in that spirit, I also want to remind myself and each of you, as you traverse, move with the spirit of non-judgment, non-castigation, avoiding anger. If you're angry about your situation, your affairs, remember that the Prophet ﷺ said not to go angry, not to go near it. And so I encourage all of us to hold to our faith. And I think we will see in this lesson today, even in deeper profundity, about the importance of this. I want to thank those of you who support the organization with your finances, with your prayers, with your attendance, with your contributions and time, set up, whatever that is. I just want to thank you for that. And so the Faith Club, if you want to put it in your calendar, will be September the 20th at 10 a.m. at the United Methodist Church in Claremont, Florida. And it would be great to have a showing. It's a Saturday morning, I believe, if I remember correctly. I might be wrong about that. If somebody wants to, it's a Wednesday morning, sorry. So I guess most people will be working. But if you can make it, it would be an awesome piece of da'wah to see a larger group of Muslims there. And so I will be at the Unitarian Universalist Church in New Smyrna Beach on the 24th of September, and I will be speaking about Islamophobia. And so that's what they asked me to talk about. And if you've never heard me speak about Islamophobia, it would be something that you might be interested in hearing. I'll be at the Unitarian Universalist Church in Ormond on the 29th of October, inshallah, presenting on Radical Welcome. And then September the 15th, the Interfaith and Community Resource Network, for which I'm on the leadership team, will be conducting a conference at, alhamdulillah, the Islamic Center of Daytona Beach, inviting the public to come in and find out where they can get social services and what specific social services. We have the Lions Club coming in, sometimes doing free eye exams. They won't be able to do it this time, looking for 5 different ocular diseases, mashallah. This particular event will focus at least on affordable housing and then domestic violence. And may Allah forgive me for getting what the third agenda will be. December the 24th, Sunday morning, the 24th of December, I will be at the Unitarian Universalist Church in New Smyrna Beach. I'm really struggling with that this morning. And that's obviously Sunday the 24th. And we will start working diligently on the September potluck, which has a little bit of challenge, as I will be traveling to California to perform a wedding, inshallah, and to do some da'wah in the Carmel area, inshallah. Naran and I will be traveling. So in terms of prayers, joys, and concerns, if any of you have any, I would be so grateful if you would type them in the chat so I can announce them. But I don't know how many of you might know Imam Shadi from the Claremont Masjid. He and I have been friends for 17 years, since he was the Imam. Sorry, I'm having a little cough. Since he was the Imam at Masjid An-Nur on Polynesian in Simi. And interestingly enough, that's where I met Laith, my son-in-law, for the first time, was at Masjid An-Nur, whenever Imam Shadi had invited me to speak. He received his PhD, one of the first Muslims, and I think more than 100 years in religious education. And I was the MC of an event at the Islamic Center of South Lake County yesterday. And I was blessed to see that one of the brothers who's on the board at the Islamic Center of Daytona Masjid, who lives here in New Smyrna, was also there. So it's wonderful when the community reaches out to you and you get to reconnect with people that you've known for many years, alhamdulillah. And so also, again, let me mention that Camila and Lay, alhamdulillah, had Dean yesterday at 11:40 a.m., weighing in at 7.6 pounds and 21 3/4 inches long. MashaAllah, we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will guide them as parents and guide Dean to be one of the best examples of this deen, of this religion, of this debt that we owe to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We continue to pray for Angelica and Badr's Shams, their daughter, MashaAllah, for Claudette and Gennard's Aya, and for Megan and Jamal's Havas, their new baby, inshallah. And I just received a request to please pray for, why am I chat? Okay. I think this is from Julie, that she's very sick and cannot work, feeling very weak. So let's add Julie to that list, inshallah. And also to continue to pray for Rosie's son Michael, who has testicular cancer, and Ridwana's mother, who is in rehab, I believe, for her knee replacement, her knee surgery, inshallah. And then there are some joys that Mika's brother and wife have gotten visas, I believe, some employment, some wonderful things that are happening. Also pray for James and Julie in their new business adventure that they're trying to move into. MashaAllah, James is training to be a home inspector. So as soon as he gets finished that course and gets his passes his exam and all of that, if you know any realtors or anyone, please refer them to James. Maysoon, also please pray for her and her sort of new career ideas and endeavors. And let me just check the chat to see if I left out anything here. MashaAllah. And also Donna and Bilal. Donna lost her father unexpectedly this week. So please pray for Donna. And I believe that is all of the list. Inshallah. So in Alhamdulillah, nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruh wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. All praise is due to Allah Azza wa Jal. We seek Allah's help and forgiveness. We seek refuge with Allah from the evil in our souls and bad deeds. Whom Allah guides will never be led astray, and whoever Allah leads astray, no one can guide. I bear witness that there is no God, there is no deity but Allah Azza wa Jal, the one having no partners, and I bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is Allah's final slave and messenger. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. O you who have believed, fear Allah as Allah alone should be feared, and do not die except as Muslims in submission to Allah. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبعث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. O people, be dutiful to your Lord, who created you from one soul and created from it its mate, and dispersed from both many men and women. Fear Allah, through whom you demand mutual rights and revere the wounds that mourn. Indeed, Allah is ever over you and observer. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. O you who have believed, fear Allah and speak words of appropriate justice. Allah will then amend for you your deeds and forgive you for your sins. And whoever obeys Allah and Allah's messenger has certainly attained the greatest of attainments. So just a quick 1-minute review. Last week, we examined Imam Ghazali's passages on the Gnosis of the self. And he shared with us that the key to the Gnosis is the key to the Gnosis of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And out of that, there were 9 points. And I'll just quickly mention them. The first one is to recognize that know thyself was a universal maxim that went back to the time of the Greeks. It is a way to gain insight not only into oneself, but also into the nature of reality and the divine. And if you look at the miraculous nature of Allah's creation of a human being, with all the organs and body parts that we've been talking about, bones, sinew, it's unbelievable that you can only see divineness through that. There's no man that can create something or woman that can create something like this. The second point that was made last week was about experiential knowledge of the self and how it goes beyond the surface level of self-awareness. It involves actually recognizing patterns within oneself. If you do not know yourself, truly know yourself, and know the things that you're doing that are contrary to Quran and Sunnah, how will you be able to correct? If you, on the other hand, don't know the Quran and the Sunnah, how will you then do the things that will take you to the connection back to your God infusion, the connection with your fitra? So this experiential knowledge of the self, where I actually know about this, I have an experiential knowledge of studying myself and correcting myself and disciplining my soul. Again, it is crucial to developing experiential knowledge and awareness of Allah. So if you don't do that, you will never know Allah as well. You will just have a superficial knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you'll meet a lot of people that say, I'm a cultural Muslim, I'm a cultural Jew, but they don't have an experiential knowledge or personal relationship with their Lord because they don't even know themselves. So it goes hand in hand. And then we talked about self-knowledge and spiritual practice, because self-knowledge serves as a mirror for gaining insight into the divine. And we'll talk about this even more today. We're going to elaborate on this today. Understanding oneself is a means of gaining awareness and insight into Allah as a wajah, because we know that anthropomorphism is where that we talked about God's hands and God's eyes, and we make a comparison to Allah. We're going to clarify that because some people have misunderstandings about that today, inshallah. And then we looked at 2 aspects of self-knowledge. The one that was more obscure, that may be difficult for intellectual people to comprehend, and the other that everyone understands. The latter actually involves recognizing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's existence and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's attributes within one's own essence. Intellectuals struggle to work with that which they cannot see with the instrument of these eyes, which are delusion. And just to give you an example, if we just pulled our eyes like this, something we can do. Now I'm seeing two of my screen. That is what I see, but does that make it true? No, there's not two screens there. The one that I'm looking at. And so these little profound pieces, pearls of wisdom are only found if we're willing to go deeper than the surface level. And then the fifth point was recognizing the Creator's attributes, and by introspection and observing the intricacies of our own bodies, attributes, and needs, the passage, one can recognize and identify the characteristics of the Creator. And remember, Allah said, I will teach you in yourself and in the signs of the universe. It emphasizes the perfection and wisdom inherent in the design and functionality of the human body, considering its complexity and purpose. And the sixth review point was that attributes of God through self-knowledge, through understanding one's own existence, characteristics, and needs, a person can perceive the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. By seeing the interconnectedness of all aspects of their being, individuals can gain insight into the Creator's knowledge, power, and mercy. And then the seventh point was about divine attributes in creation. The perfect design and organization of the human body parts, needs, and tools indicate the divine attributes of knowledge, mercy, and care. These aspects of creation demonstrate the Creator's benevolence and concern for all living beings. The eighth point was about kindness and mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Through self-knowledge, one can observe the comparison and mercy of Allah, which are manifested in the intricacies and blessings of our very existence. This understanding leads to a deeper connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with the divine. And that last point, but not least, is again about self-knowledge as a mirror. Self-knowledge serves as a mirror that reflects and reveals spiritual knowledge about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. By comprehending one's own existence and attributes, individuals can access insight into Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's divine nature and characteristics. And so now we are going to move into a passage where Imam Ghazali talked about the purity and the sanctity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he begins by saying, as one has come to know the attributes of Allah, may he be glorified and exalted. And by the way, that's what, when I say Allah as a wajal, that's what that means. May he be glorified and exalted. From one's own attributes and his essence from one's own essence, one may know his incomparability and sanctity from one's own purity and sanctity. Powerful statement. So when we look at this statement, tanzi in Arabic means incomparability, transcendence, unknowableness, and remoteness. So we know that so much of understanding Allah and His message is about this. Tanzi is to declare that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala transcends every quality or attribute that is possessed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creatures. I want you to watch something very beautiful here in a moment. The word tanzi derives from the word nazala, which means to keep something away from anything contaminating or making it impure. So, naziha in Arabic means chaste, pure, free from flaws, free from bad attributes. The rational faculty declares Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's incomparability, but this is only half of the absolute truth, because Allah has both transcendence and similarity, which is called tashbih. I know you might get caught up in these words, but if you can, just try to grab this beautiful piece. So tashbih is an Islamic religious concept meaning anthropomorphism, assimilating, comparing God to his creatures, sorry. I am struggling with a little bit of sinuses and cold today, so bear with me. In Islamic theology, two opposite terms are attributed to Allah, tashbih and tanzih. The fuller meaning of tashbih is affirming similarity. That is, affirming similarity between God and his creatures. Now, I know what you're thinking, but nothing compares to Allah. And this is where we have to be so careful how we interpret, or how we might not understand an Arabic word that would explain something that you might hear in English. This concept, interestingly enough, is eternally juxtaposed with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's tanzih, which most people do know about, transcendence or declaring incomparability. So let's look at something really, really beautiful in the Holy Quran. First, we see in Surah 42, verse 11, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, nothing is like unto him. So what are you saying? It's like you just contradict yourself. Listen to the rest of the verse. But the second part of the verse says, he is all hearing and all seeing. There's nothing similar. And then it turns right around and says something that we can relate to within ourselves. He is all hearing and all seeing. And this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's similarity, the best translation of the word tashbih. The absolute truth is Allah's incomparability and his similarity. So often you will hear people very afraid to say anything because they might say that they're like him. No, it's similar but not like him. Very much difference. And this is where English often isn't able to easily convey the depths of some Arabic. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the essence itself, is utterly incomparable. While similarity is attributed in this verse to Allah as the divinity, part of his divinity. The meaning of purity and sanctity with respect to the Creator Most High is that he said he is absolutely pure of and sanctified beyond anything that can be conceived or imagined. And we're back to now what Imam Ghazali is saying. He is absolutely pure from anything that may be attributed to him in any locality, even though no locality is devoid of his control. And this, again, is a piece of profundity, that we don't attribute to him any specific place, but yet there's no specific place that he isn't in control of. Which is another lecture that we can't do today. We have control of very little of this. Very, very little. And the harder that we try to control things, the more miserable we usually are. Because we don't have much control. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in control. And when Allah brings us something and we try to control it, that seems to be a test, what we're actually supposed to do in correct Islamic thinking is thank Allah for it and ask Allah for the courage to win the test, to make 100 on the test, inshallah. A person sees the parallel of this in him or herself. You see, the true nature of our lives, or his or her life, which Imam Ghazali says, which we call the heart, is beyond that which comes in fancy and imagination. And so it's interesting, it came to my mind when I looked at Imam Ghazali's words, fancies and imagination. How many people really know what that means? And so Samuel Taylor Coleridge, in his poetry and literary criticisms developed these two concepts, which I find very interesting, to distinguish between two different types of creative process. Now, here we find a man, whether he was connected to God or not, I don't know. But look at what he found in his poetry and look at the correlation here. Fancy he defined as a lower form of imagination, based on the random combination of sensory impressions, memories, and associations. Through fancy, we create new images by combining and recombining existing ones. It is a mechanical process that does not involve any deep understanding or insight. So it's that surface stuff. Coleridge defined imagination as a higher form of creativity that involves deeper understanding and insight. Coleridge defined imagination as a higher form of creativity that involves a deeper understanding and insight. It is the ability, he said, to create new images, ideas, and concepts based on the understanding of the underlying principles of the natural world and the human mind. It is an active, creative process that involves the synthesis of new ideas rather than the staying just connected to the existing ones. So when we do tadabbur in Islam, we do deep contemplation, insight, in order to get pearls or resolve to have a higher creative level of processing. Let me get back to Imam Ghazali, but I just thought that he used those words, and since they came from a great poet, I'm guessing that poet might have gotten it from Greek philosophy. Allahu A'lam. Let's get back to Imam Ghazali. He says, for we have said that he, Allah, has no measure of quantity, nor is he divisible. As that is the case, he has no color, and anything which has no color or measure does not occur to the imagination under any conditions. For that which appears in the imagination is something that the eye has seen or something of that kind. So remember that the brain up here uses its five senses and very limited, takes that information and makes decisions about it, and sometimes believes is deluded to believe it's true. He goes on to say, there is nothing in the province of the eye and the imagination except forms and colors. So although the term imagination, when used by Coleridge, is slightly different, we know that in the Islamic context, we have to be very careful with our imagination because it can take us down some very unpleasurable and delusional rabbit holes. So he goes on and he says, when our nature demands, what is that thing like? I got questions yesterday from some of my family in North Carolina. What is Dean like? How long is he? What does his hair look like? So when our nature demands, we want to know, what is the thing like? The meaning of that is, what shape does it have? Is it small or large? But for something which does not admit of such descriptions, questions of nature and quality are useless. And this is where we have to understand that the things of the spirit are connected to the heart, the I.S.L.A.M, the ruh. You can't see the ruh. So he says here, if you wish to know, it is permissible that something exists which does not admit of shape and form. So if we are looking at the I.S.L.A.M, then we are going to be looking at things that we cannot see with these delusional eyes, but we can see with the eyes, the basara of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he says here, look into the true nature of yourself. So what good will it do to use these eyes in my head? How can I look? Can I look inside? Can I get some Naran to look in my ear and see if she sees the true nature of myself? There's a little hole there. She might could see something. No. So he says the true nature of yours, which is the locus of Gnosis, experiential knowledge about Islam, about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is indivisible and is not touched by measurement, quantity, or quality. These eyes, it only makes sense if I can see it, and it's got length, width, depth. I can touch it, maybe I can hear it, maybe I can smell it, maybe I can taste it. So he goes on and he asks a very amazing question. He said, if someone asks, what kind of thing is the spirit? What kind of thing is the ruh? The answer is, it does not reveal of questions about its nature and quality. So if you ask yourself, okay, ruh, tell me about yourself. Did anybody hear anything? He goes on and he says, and you have known yourself from these qualities. Know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, may he be honored and glorified, surpasses them in purity and sanctity. People find it strange that there is an ineffable and inscrutable being. Yet they are the same themselves, but they do not recognize it in themselves. So, by the way, use the word ineffable and inscrutable. Ineffable simply means too great to examine or examined to be expressed or described in words. It's indescribable. And then inscrutable means impossible to understand. So one thing you can't describe it, the other thing you can't understand. So let's just look at what he said again. He said, however, if a person searches his or her own body, they will find and see thousands of things, all of which are too great or extreme to be expressed or described in words, and impossible to understand or interpret. For example, he says, in him or herself, they see anger, they see love, they see pain, they see pleasure. Can any of us measure that? He goes on, he says, if they desire to seek their nature and quality, they will not be able to do so. For such things have neither form nor color, and there is no way to question them. Can you say, hello, anger? Can you tell me a little bit about your anger? What level is it? Are you just a little perturbed? Is somebody getting under your skin? Are you irritated? Are you a little bit on edge? And we use all of these words. He goes on and he says, indeed, if a person were to seek the true nature of sound, the true nature of smell, or the true nature of taste, their nature and quality, they will be incapable of doing so. I don't think any of us have ever said, hey, smell. Do you think you could go on today because I'm having allergies and I can't smell anything? And he goes on and he says, the reason for this is that questions of how and why are the demands of the imagination obtained from the senses of sight, which then seeks out everything which is in the providence of the eye. So there's a providence for the eye, and there's a providence for the soul. He goes on, and this just, when I read his works, it's always my heart. It's not in my brain. I use my brain to try to figure out what it means. But really what I see is with my heart. And then my heart takes me to a deeper level of understanding by looking at the parameters. He goes on. He says the eye has no part in that which is in the province of the ear. I think I said providence before. I meant to say province. such as the voice, for example. And it is impossible for it to see the how and why of sound. The sound of the voice is beyond the province of the eye, just as color and form are beyond the province of the ear. The ear can't tell what color something is. In the same manner, that which the sensory organ of the animal soul perceives, and which is known by the intellect, is beyond the province of all the physical senses. There is a quality in nature in perceptible, visible, discernible, and perceivable things. This is an investigation and profundity which we have explained in books of discourse, he says. And he says, let this small piece of writing suffice for this book. The point is that a person can come to know the ineffability, those things that are too great or extreme to be expressed or described in words, and inscrutability, those things that are impossible to understand and interpret, themselves from the inevitability and the inscrutability. Allah may be glorified and exalted. So he said we can learn how to separate the two, how to see the difference. He says they may know that as the spirit exists and is the sovereign of the body, every part of the body for which there is a purpose in nature is all its kingdom. So this ruh that we can't see is sovereign over all of these things which we can see. But it is ineffable. It is too great and too extreme to be described in words. And it is also impossible to fully understand and interpret. So some might say to me, but aren't you interpreting it? And we're gonna come back and get something from Allah from this, inshallah. So again, he says, it's too great or extreme to be expressed or described in words. It's also impossible to fully understand and interpret it. And he compares it. He says, just as the sovereign of the universe is ineffable and inscrutable, all things which possess purpose and description, such as perceptible things, are all of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's kingdom. Another kind of incomparability is that it is not attributed to any place. The spirit cannot be attributed to any organ. One cannot say that it is in the hand. My ruh is in my hand. My ruh is in my head. No. Or in some other place. Indeed, all the limbs of the body may be divided, but the ruh, is not divisible. You can cut off my hand. You can remove my leg, but you cannot divide my spirit, my ruh. It is impossible for the indivisible to alight in the divisible, for then it becomes divisible. Though it does not accept attribution to any organ, no organ is free from its authority. And this ties into the shad of the authority of the ruh, the will. If it's Allah's will, God's shad, because I'm obeying Allah, it's different to my earthly will, which is driven by my nafs. He said, indeed, all of these organs that are free from its authority, all of them are controlled by it and obey its command. He goes on so beautifully, and he says, ruh, or spirit, is the king of them all, just as the world is under the control of the king of the world. And he is above being ascribed to any particular place. Can't describe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to a specific place, but look at this amazing universe that we cannot describe how he runs it, how every lunar cycle works. The totality of this kind of sanctification and separation, setting of Allah apart, becomes manifest when you speak of the special quality and mystery of the ruh, of the spirit. He reminds us there is no permission to speak of the special quality and mystery of the spirit. In Surah 17, verse 85, the spirit, or ruh, is from the command of my Lord, from the command of God. And you have not been given knowledge save a little. So Allah says, know that this ruh that you cannot see, that can actually, if you let it govern all of your limbs and make them successful, then they will never testify against you. He has given us little information. He said the totality of that is made manifest by the words, verily Allah Most High created man in his image. And this is where a lot of people struggle, but look at the context. It doesn't mean, image doesn't mean what it means when we're talking about these eyes. So this passage, this short passage that I've just shared with you, it delves into the idea of understanding the divine nature of our own existence through the lens of ineffability. Let me read it again, because I know that some of us might struggle, like myself, with those words that you don't hear very often. This passage delves into the idea of understanding the divine nature and our own existence through the lens of those things too great or extreme to be expressed or to describe in words. We start having experiential knowledge of something we cannot see. And then he adds also the fact of being impossible to understand or interpret, and the interconnectedness between the Creator and the Son. Allahu Akbar. If you just process this, how could we think for a moment that we are not God infused? That the fitra is not alive within us if we keep it fed and nurtured by the commands of Allah. That we came from the soul world. We are not of this world. We are alien to this world. We are aliens in the world. Everything else belongs to the world. We belong to heaven, and we're going to go back there. So let me break down the main things. Try to simplify this again. Attributes of Allah's purity and sanctity. The passage discusses the notion that through introspection, the examination or observation of one's own mental and emotional process, we can come to understand the attributes of Allah by recognizing parallels between our own attributes and His essence. This includes comprehending Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's incomparability and sanctity, signifying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala transcends any conceivable or imaginable attributes that can be seen with the eyes of our head or heard with the ears on our head. Those things too great or extreme to be expressed or described in words. And indivisibility was the next piece we looked at. That piece emphasized the idea that Allah's essence lacks form, color, measure, and divisibility. This inability to define Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's nature extends to the self as well, particularly to aspects like the spirit. We cannot explain our spirit. do my best to teach you what little I know of it. It points out that questions about the nature and quality of certain aspects are fruitless due to the fact that they cannot be explained and they cannot be understood. And then he spoke about sensory perceptions and how they cannot handle these things that are too extreme. It goes on to compare how sensory perceptions such as sight and sound are beyond the scope of each other's senses, Similarly, this ineffable and inscrutable nature of Allah is beyond the comprehension of sensory perception. You will only understand it when you connect to it with your heart and you know how to do this because you keep practicing it every single time of the day. And don't think you're not doing this. Every time you pray, you're doing this. So 5 times a day, I hope you're doing this today. Every time you make dhikr, you're doing this. Every time you make an intention, every time you do something for the sake of Allah, you are connecting to this. And then he touched on spiritual sovereignty, drawing parallels between the sovereignty of the human spirit over the body and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's sovereignty over the universe. How easy then, when we think about it like that, how hard it is for us to train and discipline our soul to run the universe of our body, how easy Allah manages this universe. So we see this parallel. Just as the spirit governs the body and its parts without being attributed to any specific location, Allah's control extends over all creation without being limited to any place. This was another reason when I argued and I defended my position as a Christian minister that Jesus could not be God, because Jesus cannot be everywhere. He could only be where he was. And then he talked about divisibility and indivisibility, discussing how the spirit is indivisible and cannot be attributed to any specific organ, yet it has authority over the body's organs. This mirrors Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's divine nature, which is indivisible and encompasses all aspects of creation while being beyond attribution of a place. And then he tried to help us understand what sanctification means in the context of Allah Azza wa Jal. And then he asserts that understanding the sanctification of the self and its mysterious aspects can help us comprehend the concept of sanctification in relationship to Allah. May Allah guide us to reach this level of elevation as we seek to be closer to Allah in the pursuit of this alchemy of happiness that will only be found when we find this. This relates to the idea that humans were created in the image of God, suggesting a deeper connection between the divine and human essence. In essence, this passage explores the idea that by understanding those things that we are incapable of explaining, and those things that we cannot describe, the ineffable and the inscrutable aspects of our own existence, we can gain insight into the nature of Allah. It encourages readers and searchers to reflect on the interconnectedness between the creator and the creation, Allah and you, Allah and me, Allah and us. And if you do not study yourself, you will never ever be able to do this. Through this reflection, inshallah, we will develop a deeper awareness of the divine nature and our own existence and essence. he goes on to talk about, inshallah, and we'll talk about this next week or next class, the Gnosis of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's management of his kingdom. So I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to open our spiritual eyes and our spiritual ears. And I promise you, you may not think you gathered a whole lot of this, but the ears of your heart and the eyes of your heart, that brain that is in that metaphorical chest of yours, is beyond what you can explain and what it learns and what it hears that you do not know about. So again, I love you all for the sake of Allah. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Consider you, O Allah, and praise be to you as you have praised yourself. I bear witness that there is no deity except you. I seek your forgiveness, Allah, and I repent.